The phone trembled in my hand as Nathan's voice crackled through the line, urgent and strained. I'd been enjoying the peaceful morning, the autumn sun streaming through my kitchen windows, casting golden patterns across the tile floor. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday in our quiet Belmont neighborhood, but ordinary died the moment my son-in-law spoke those impossible words. "Mom, is Marissa there with you?" Nathan asked, his voice tight with something I couldn't quite place. Concern? Fear? "Yes, honey," I replied, glancing toward the stairs where my daughter-in-law had disappeared just minutes earlier. "She's upstairs taking a shower. She said she'd be down in a bit to help me with lunch before we pick up Matthew from school. Is everything okay?" The silence that followed stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. "Nathan?" I prompted, pressing the phone closer to my ear. "Are you still there?" "That's impossible," he finally whispered, his voice now trembling. "Mom, that's impossible because Marissa is here with me. She just boarded my flight to New York. I can see her right now, sitting in first class." My blood turned to ice. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself, my knuckles whitening against the marble. "Nathan, that can't be right. She's been here all morning. We had coffee together. She helped Matthew with his science project before school." "Mom," Nathan's voice dropped even lower, urgent and frightened. "I have her passport in my hand. She gave it to me for safekeeping before boarding. It's her. I'm looking at her right now." The sound of water running upstairs suddenly stopped. My eyes darted to the ceiling, tracking the soft footsteps moving across the bathroom floor. "I need to go," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Someone's in the house." "Mom, listen to me." Nathan's voice was frantic now. "Get out of there. Call the police. Don't." The line went dead, whether Nathan had hung up or we'd lost connection. I couldn't tell. But in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was the sound of footsteps descending the stairs. Slow, deliberate, each creak of the old wood sending a fresh wave of terror through me. I stood paralyzed, the dead phone still clutched in my hand. What does a person do when faced with the impossible? When someone you trust, someone who belongs in your home, suddenly becomes a stranger, an intruder? The woman who rounded the corner looked exactly like Marissa, my beautiful daughter-in-law of 8 years. The same chestnut hair, now damp and wrapped in a towel. The same warm brown eyes. The same small mole just below her left eyebrow that Matthew used to touch as a toddler, calling it her special spot. "Catherine, is everything okay?" she asked, concern spreading across her familiar features. "You look like you've seen a ghost." In some ways, I had. "Nathan just called," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I watched her face carefully, looking for any flicker of, what? Fear? Recognition? Guilt? Oh? Her expression remained open, curious. What did he want? I thought he was flying today. He is flying. He's at the airport now. I took a small step backward, putting the kitchen island between us. He said Marissa is there with him, that she just boarded his flight to New York. For a fraction of a second, so brief I might have imagined it, something shifted behind her eyes. Then she laughed, a perfect imitation of Marissa's gentle, melodic laugh. "That's ridiculous. I'm obviously right here." She gestured to herself, droplets of water still clinging to her neck. Nathan must be confused. Maybe he saw someone who looks like me. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like something the real Marissa would say. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't unsee what suddenly seemed so obvious. The slightly different way she held herself, more confident than Marissa's usual gentle posture. The way her eyes, darted around the room, cataloging exits and entrances in a way my daughter-in-law never did. "Maybe," I conceded, inching toward my purse where my cell phone waited. "Strange mistake to make, though, isn't it? Confusing his own wife with a stranger?" She shrugged, but her shoulders were tight. "People see what they expect to see sometimes. I'm sure he's just tired from all those long flights." "Right," I said, my fingers finally closing around my phone. "I'll just text him to clear things up." "Actually," she interjected quickly, "while you do that, I'm going to run to the store. We're out of milk for Matthew's after-school snack. Be back in 20 minutes?" Before I could respond, she was moving toward the front door, the towel abandoned on a kitchen chair. Her hair was already dry, I realized with a start. Bone dry, despite the shower I'd supposedly heard running. She grabbed Marissa's purse from the entryway table and slipped out the door without looking back. The house fell into a terrible silence. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me, and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. But what would I say? That my daughter-in-law was simultaneously on a plane and in my house? That an identical imposter had been living under our roof? How long had this been happening? Days? Weeks? As the dispatcher answered, another thought struck me with paralyzing force. Matthew. My 7-year-old grandson was at school, blissfully unaware that the woman who had kissed him goodbye this morning might not be his mother at all. 911, what's your emergency? I took a deep breath and spoke the words that would forever divide my life into before and after. There's an intruder in my family, someone pretending to be my daughter-in-law, and I think my grandson might be in danger. The police arrived within minutes, their cruisers pulling into our driveway with silent lights, a courtesy to avoid alarming the neighbors, Detective Rivera explained. A small mercy in the midst of chaos. Our tree-lined street in Belmont was known for its tranquility, not police investigations. They took my statement in the living room, the same room where just last night Marissa had curled up with Matthew, reading him stories before bedtime. The same room where we'd celebrated birthdays, Christmases, everyday moments that now felt tainted by an invisible poison. Doubt. Mrs. Harlow, Detective Rivera said, her dark eyes kind but searching. I understand how upsetting this must be, but I need to confirm, you're certain the woman wasn't your daughter-in-law? I nodded, clasping my hands to stop them from trembling. My son-in-law called me from the airport. He was looking at Marissa, the real Marissa, while talking to me on the phone, while another woman who looked exactly like her was upstairs in my shower. And this woman has been living in your home? Not exactly. Marissa and Nathan have their own house across town, but she's here almost daily helping with my grandson while Nathan flies. I never suspected. My voice broke. How could I not have known? Detective Rivera's partner, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, looked up from his notepad. Sometimes the people closest to us are the hardest to see clearly, Mrs. Harlow. Don't blame yourself. Easy words. Empty comfort. If I couldn't trust my own eyes, my own instincts about someone I considered a daughter, what could I trust? We've stationed an officer at your grandson's school, Rivera continued. No one will be allowed to pick him up except the personnel we've cleared. Now we need to contact your daughter-in-law on that flight. What airline is your son-in-law working for today? Atlantic Airways, Flight 2716 to New York. I'd memorized Nathan's schedule weeks ago, placing it on the refrigerator as I always did when he was flying. Nathan's the co-pilot. Marissa was supposed to be here all week. She never mentioned any trip to New York. As Rivera stepped away to make calls, I found myself drifting toward the mantel where our family photos stood in neat rows. Marissa and Nathan on their wedding day, her radiant smile as he dipped her for a kiss. Matthew as a newborn, cradled in Marissa's arms, her face a portrait of exhausted joy. Annual Christmas photos, birthday celebrations, a summer picnic at Lake Merritt. I picked up a frame from last Thanksgiving, studying Marissa's face. Was it really her? Had there been moments, days, when another woman had slipped into our lives wearing Marissa's face like a mask? How many memories were real, and how many were fabrications? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Nathan's name flashed on the screen. Nathan? What's happening? The police are here. Mom! His voice was steadier now, controlled in that way he'd had since childhood when trying to be brave. The flight attendants helped me reach Marissa. She's in shock. She says she never planned to fly today. Someone drugged her coffee this morning and brought her to the airport. She woke up confused, with a ticket in her hand and someone ushering her onto the plane. She thought she was dreaming until she saw me. I sank onto the couch, the room spinning around me. Who would do this? Who could possibly? Mom, Nathan interrupted, his voice dropping to a whisper. Marissa thinks. She thinks it might be Clara. The name hit me like a physical blow. Clara, a name Marissa had mentioned only once, during a late-night conversation years ago when Matthew was just a baby. Her identical twin sister, separated at birth when their struggling teenage mother couldn't care for 2 infants. Marissa had been adopted by a loving family in Ohio. Clara had disappeared into the foster care system. They'd found each other in college through one of those DNA ancestry websites, a miraculous reunion that quickly soured. Clara is troubled, Marissa had told me, her voice tight with old pain. Our reunion didn't go well. She has problems, mental health issues, substance abuse. She blamed me for having the perfect life while hers fell apart. We haven't spoken in years. I'd comforted her that night, assuring her that none of it was her fault. Then we'd both moved on, Clara becoming just a sad footnote in Marissa's history, or so I'd thought. Nathan, this is insane. I whispered, aware of Detective Rivera watching me intently. How would Clara even know where we live? How could she have inserted herself into our lives without anyone noticing? Social media, Nathan replied grimly. Marissa says Clara's been following her accounts for years. She knows everything about our lives, our routines. Mom, she even knows that Matthew's allergic to strawberries and that you volunteer at the library on Thursdays. A chill ran through me as I realized the extent of our vulnerability. Our lives, open books to someone with the patience to read them and the cunning to exploit them. The police need to find her, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. Before she comes back, before she tries to get to Matthew. They will, Nathan assured me, though his confidence sounded forced. Our flight is being diverted back to Chicago. We'll be on the ground. In an hour, don't worry, Mom, we'll figure this out. As I hung up, Detective Rivera approached with a tablet in hand. Mrs. Harlow, we may have something. Security footage from the convenience store 2 blocks from your home, taken 15 minutes ago. She turned the screen toward me. There she was, the woman who had been in my shower, who had lived among us like a ghost. She was at the counter, paying for items I couldn't make out. But it wasn't what she was buying that made my blood run cold. It was what she was doing. With practiced ease, she was changing her appearance. The chestnut hair was now tucked under a blonde wig. Colored contacts had transformed Marissa's warm brown eyes to a piercing blue. Even her posture was different, straighter, more confident. That's her, I whispered. That's Clara. Rivera nodded grimly. We've got officers en route to that location now, but it's been almost 20 minutes. She could be anywhere. No, I said, a terrible certainty settling over me. Not anywhere. She's going to Matthew's school. She's going to try to take my grandson. The drive to Oak Ridge Elementary was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Detective Rivera insisted I stay. Behind, but maternal instinct, even for a grandson, isn't something easily contained by police tape and protocol. I followed their cruiser in my own car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers went numb. We have officers at every entrance, Rivera had assured me. If this woman, Clara, attempts to approach the school, we'll apprehend her immediately. But doubt gnawed at me like a hungry beast. Clara had lived among us undetected for who knows how long. What if she'd already established herself at Matthew's school? What if the teachers, the staff, people I trusted with my grandson's safety, couldn't tell the difference between the twins? I parked haphazardly near the front entrance, barely remembering to turn off the engine before running toward the building. The school day wouldn't end for another hour, but the familiar brick structure, usually so welcoming, now loomed like a fortress I needed to breach. Principal Grayson met me at the front doors, his normally jovial face etched with concern. Mrs. Harlow, Detective Rivera briefed me. We've implemented immediate security protocols. Matthew is safe in his classroom, and we've stationed an officer directly outside. I need to see him, I said, my voice cracking. Please, I need to make sure he's okay. Grayson hesitated, glancing at Rivera, who had appeared at my side. We don't want to frighten the children, Mrs. Harlow. The officer is very discreet, but if we pull Matthew from class, please, I repeated, unable to mask the desperation in my voice. You don't understand what this woman is capable of. Something in my expression must have convinced him. With a nod, Grayson led us through the empty hallways, past colorful bulletin boards showcasing student artwork and science projects. Under different circumstances, I would have paused to look for Matthew's contributions. He was so proud whenever his work was displayed. Today, I barely registered the surroundings. Outside room 204, a plainclothes officer nodded at Rivera. Through the small window in the door, I could see children sitting in groups, working on what appeared to be an art project. And there, at the blue table in the corner, was Matthew, my golden-haired, freckle-faced grandson, happily cutting construction paper, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. He's safe, Rivera said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. We won't let anything happen to him. I nodded, tears of relief threatening to spill. Can we take him home now? I don't feel comfortable with him here, even with protection. Rivera and Grayson exchanged glances. That might be best, Grayson conceded. We can tell him there's a family emergency. Keep things calm. As Grayson entered the classroom, Rivera's radio crackled to life. She stepped away to respond, her expression darkening as she listened. When she returned, her composure had hardened into something more urgent. Mrs. Harlow, we need to move quickly. Our officers at the convenience store found evidence that Clara might have an accomplice. The cashier remembers her meeting with a man in the parking lot. Tall, dark-haired, driving a silver sedan. My mind raced. Andrew, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. My older son. He drives a silver Audi. But that's impossible. Andrew would never. Rivera's expression remained carefully neutral. We're not jumping to conclusions, but we need to consider all possibilities. Does Andrew know about Clara? I don't think so. Marissa rarely spoke about her, and never to Andrew directly, as far as I know. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. What did I really know anymore? If Clara could fool me, Marissa's own mother-in-law, who else might she have deceived? The classroom door opened, and Matthew emerged, his small hand in Principal Grayson's. His face lit up when he saw me. Grandma, are we going somewhere fun? I forced a smile, kneeling to his level. We're going to have a special afternoon at home. Sweetheart, how does that sound? Matthew's eyes narrowed slightly. He was too perceptive for his age, too quick to sense when adults weren't being entirely truthful. Is Mom coming too? She promised to help me finish my rocket model today. I exchanged glances with Rivera, uncertain how to answer. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the woman he thought was his mother might be an imposter? Your mom and dad will be home soon, I said carefully. They can't wait to see you. But for now, it's just you and me, okay? Matthew nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. As we walked toward the exit, flanked by officers, I felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I pulled Matthew closer to me, scanning the empty hallway. Mrs. Harlow? Rivera questioned, noting my sudden tension. Nothing, I murmured, though the feeling persisted. Let's just get home. We were almost at the main entrance when a commotion erupted outside. Raised voices, the squeal of tires on pavement. Rivera's radio crackled again, urgent voices reporting that a silver Audi had just sped away from the school parking lot after dropping off a woman, who matched Clara's description. She's here, I whispered, clutching Matthew's hand tighter. She's in the building. Secure the exits, Rivera commanded into her radio. Full lockdown protocol. Now! The school's alarm system blared to life, red lights flashing as classroom doors slammed shut. Matthew pressed against me, his small body trembling. Grandma, what's happening? Is it a drill? Before I could answer, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. A woman in a blue dress and blonde wig, her face obscured by large sunglasses. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then she bolted toward a side exit, Rivera and another officer immediately in pursuit. Get him out of here! Rivera shouted back at us. East entrance! Officer Diaz will escort you! The uniformed officer beside us guided us quickly through the labyrinth of hallways, Matthew now in my arms, his face buried against my shoulder. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered, even as my heart threatened to beat out of my chest. Everything's going to be okay. We burst through the east doors into the bright afternoon sunlight, the officer scanning the parking lot before ushering us toward a waiting police cruiser. As he opened, the back door for us, a silver Audi screeched around the corner of the building, tires smoking against the pavement. Get in the car, now! Officer Diaz shouted, positioning himself between us and the approaching vehicle. I scrambled into the back seat with Matthew, slamming the door as Diaz drew his weapon. Through the window, I watched in horror as the Audi accelerated directly toward us, and at the wheel, unmistakably, was Andrew, my son. His face a mask of determination I couldn't comprehend. That's my uncle's car, Matthew said, his voice small and confused as he peered over the seat. Why is Uncle Andrew here? I pulled him down, shielding his body with mine as the Audi swerved at the last moment, narrowly missing our cruiser and speeding away as officers fired warning shots into the air. In that brief instant, I caught a glimpse of the passenger. Clara, her blonde wig now gone, her face contorted with rage as she shouted something at Andrew. As our police escort jumped into the driver's seat and radioed for backup, I held Matthew close, my mind reeling with questions that had no answers. Why was Andrew helping Clara? What could possibly motivate my own son to betray his family? This way? And most terrifying of all, what were they planning next? Safe houses aren't like in the movies. No dramatic warehouse conversions or underground bunkers. The place Detective Rivera arranged for us was a modest ranch-style home in a quiet subdivision 20 miles from Belmont. Anonymous, unexceptional, perfect for disappearing. We'll stay here until we locate Clara and Andrew, Rivera explained as an officer swept the house for any security concerns. Your daughter-in-law and Nathan should arrive within the hour. Their flight just landed in Chicago. Matthew explored the unfamiliar space with the adaptability of childhood, quickly discovering a collection of board games in a hallway closet. "Can we play Monopoly, Grandma?" he asked, already setting up the board on the coffee table. I nodded, grateful for the distraction. While Matthew arranged the colorful money in neat piles, I stepped into the kitchen where Rivera was conferring with her partner. "Any news about Andrew?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Rivera's expression tightened. "The Audi was found abandoned at a shopping center 5 miles from the school. We're reviewing security footage now, but it appears they switched vehicles." "Mrs. Harlow?" She hesitated. "We need to consider that your son may be involved in this more deeply than we initially thought." The words struck me like physical blows. Andrew, my serious, responsible firstborn. The architectural prodigy who'd helped design half the municipal buildings in Belmont. The devoted brother who'd supported Nathan through flight school. The loving uncle who built Matthew a treehouse for his 5th birthday. "There has to be an explanation," I insisted. "Andrew wouldn't help someone harm his own family. Maybe he's being coerced. Maybe Clara threatened him somehow." Rivera nodded, though her eyes revealed skepticism. "We're exploring all possibilities. In the meantime, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Has Andrew been acting unusual lately? Any unexplained absences? Strange phone calls? Changes in behavior?" I started to shake my head, but then paused as memories surfaced. Small discrepancies I'd dismissed at the time. Andrew canceling our weekly Sunday dinners 3 times in the past month. The hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when someone entered the room. The sudden business trips that seemed to coincide with Marissa's busiest days at the hospital where she worked as a pediatric nurse. "He's been distant," I admitted. "I assumed it was work stress. His firm is competing for the new City Hall contract. But now, a commotion at the front door interrupted us. Officers speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Then familiar voices that made my heart leap. "Mom! Matthew!" Nathan's voice called out, strained, with exhaustion and worry. "In here," I responded, rushing to the living room. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his pilot's uniform rumpled, his face haggard from stress. Behind him stood Marissa, the real Marissa, I realized with a jolt of recognition. Even identical twins couldn't perfectly mimic the soul behind the eyes, the particular way she held her shoulders, the gentle hesitation in her step, that Clara had never quite captured. "Mommy!" Matthew abandoned the Monopoly board, launching himself across the room and into Marissa's arms. She caught him with a sob, burying her face in his golden hair, her body trembling with emotion. "My baby," she whispered. "My sweet, sweet boy. I missed you so much." The scene blurred through my tears. I felt Nathan's arm around my shoulders, strong and steady, despite everything. "It's going to be okay, Mom," he murmured. "We'll figure this out." But the reunion was tempered by the knowledge that our family remained fractured. Andrew, wherever he was, whatever his reasons, had chosen Clara's side in this incomprehensible drama. "Nathan," I began, unsure how to broach the subject. "Andrew is involved somehow. He was at the school, helping Clara." Nathan's face hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I know. Rivera briefed us on the drive here. I can't believe it. My own brother—" Marissa gently set Matthew down, whispering something about finishing the Monopoly game before joining us in the kitchen, her face pale but composed. "I should have known Clara would find a way back into our lives," she said, her voice barely audible. "She never stopped watching me, not really. All those years of silence were just preparation." "What does she want?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since this nightmare began. Why go to such elaborate lengths to infiltrate our family? Marissa's hands trembled as she accepted the cup of tea Rivera offered. "Clara believes she deserves my life," she said simply. "Since we were 19 and found each other, she's been convinced that fate made a mistake, that she should have been the one adopted by a loving family while I went to foster care. In her mind, everything I have is rightfully hers. But Andrew?" Nathan interjected. "What could possibly make him help her?" A terrible silence fell over the kitchen. Marissa stared into her tea, avoiding our eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow with old pain. "Andrew and I, there was a moment years ago before Matthew was born. We were going through a rough patch in our marriage, Nathan. You were away at flight school for months. I was lonely, confused. Andrew was there, supportive, understanding. Nothing happened," she added quickly, seeing Nathan's expression. "But there were feelings we both recognized were wrong and immediately shut down. Nathan's face had gone pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I feared for his teeth. The revelation about Andrew's feelings hung in the air between them like a poisonous cloud. In the adjacent room, we could hear Matthew explaining the rules of Monopoly to Officer Diaz, his innocent voice a stark counterpoint to the tension in the kitchen. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marissa reached for his hand across the table, but he pulled away slightly, an almost imperceptible movement that spoke volumes. "Because nothing happened," she insisted. "We recognized it was wrong and shut it down immediately. Andrew agreed we should never speak of it again." "Clearly he didn't forget," Rivera interjected, gently. "Mrs. Ellis, could this unresolved situation be what Clara is using to manipulate your brother-in-law?" Marissa nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. "Clara was there when it happened, when Andrew and I had our moment of clarity. I had reconnected with her briefly back then, trying to build a relationship. She witnessed our conversation, the one where we acknowledged the inappropriate feelings and agreed to never act on them. And now she's using it," I said, the pieces falling into horrible place, threatening to tell Nathan if Andrew doesn't help her. "It's more than that," Marissa whispered, her gaze fixed on her tea. "Clara doesn't just want to be me. She wants what I have, my husband, my child. And I think she convinced Andrew that if he helps her replace me, she'll give him what he's secretly wanted all these years." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen, his hands clenched at his sides. "So my brother, my own flesh and blood, is helping this woman steal my wife's identity so he can what? Have an affair with her evil twin? Take my son? Take my life?" "Nathan," I began, reaching for him, but he shook his head. "I need a minute." He disappeared through the back door onto the small patio, his shoulders rigid with suppressed emotion. Marissa wiped away tears, her composure cracking. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "If I had just told him years ago." "This isn't your fault," I said firmly, taking her trembling hands in mine. "You made the right choice back then. You and Andrew both did. This is about Clara and her obsession, not about a moment of weakness years ago." Rivera's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She scanned it quickly, her expression shifting from concern to focused intensity. "We have a location," she announced. "Security cameras picked up Andrew and Clara at a motel just outside the county line. Officers are en route now." "What happens when they find them?" I asked, suddenly fearful. "Andrew was still my son, despite everything." "That depends on them," Rivera said carefully. "If they surrender peacefully, we'll bring them in for questioning. No one's been hurt so far. This could still end without further escalation." Marissa's phone chimed with a notification. She glanced at it, her face draining of color. "It's Andrew," she whispered, turning the screen toward us. The message was simple, chilling. "Meet me at Blackwater Bridge. 9 p.m. Come alone or Nathan learns everything. This ends tonight." "You can't go," I insisted immediately. "It's obviously a trap." Rivera was already on her radio, coordinating with the officers headed to the motel. "Mrs. Ellis, please don't respond to that message yet. We need to set up a controlled response." But Marissa's eyes had taken on a steely determination I recognized. The same look Nathan got when he'd made an unshakable decision. "This has gone on long enough," she said quietly. "Clara has been shadowboxing with me for years, trying to steal pieces of my life. It's time we faced each other directly." "Absolutely not." Nathan's voice came from the doorway, firm and, unwavering. He'd returned from the patio, his initial shock replaced by resolute anger. "You're not meeting Andrew alone. This ends, but not like that." Rivera looked between them, her tactical mind clearly working through options. "What if we made it seem like she's meeting him alone? We could wire Mrs. Ellis, have officers surrounding the area." "Too risky," Nathan countered. "The bridge is isolated, heavily wooded on both sides. Limited access points. Andrew would spot a police presence immediately." I marveled briefly at how quickly my son had shifted into problem-solving mode, his emotions temporarily channeled into strategic thinking, a skill he'd honed through years of emergency training as a pilot. "What if I went?" I suggested suddenly, the idea forming even as I spoke it. "Clara wants to be Marissa. She wants her life, her family, but I'm the one person she can't replace. Nathan's mother, Matthew's grandmother." Rivera frowned. "Mrs. Harlow, with all due respect, that would put you in significant danger." "Maybe," I conceded, "but Andrew won't hurt me. Whatever Clara's convinced him to do, he wouldn't harm his own mother. We don't know that, Rivera cautioned. People in emotionally compromised states make unpredictable choices. Marissa touched my arm gently. Catherine, I can't let you take this risk for me. I'm not just doing it for you, I replied. I'm doing it for all of us. For Nathan, for Matthew, for our family. I turned to Rivera. And I wouldn't be alone. You'd have officers nearby, just out of sight. I could wear a wire. Nathan paced the kitchen, clearly torn. Mom, this is crazy. These aren't rational people we're dealing with. One of them is your brother, I reminded him softly. The same boy who stood up to bullies for you in middle school. The same man who helped you study for your pilot certification. There's still good in him, Nathan. A tense silence filled the room. I could see the conflict playing across Nathan's face. Fear for my safety warring with the desperate need to resolve this situation before it escalated further. Rivera's radio crackled again. She stepped away to respond, returning with a grim expression. The motel room is empty. They were already gone when our officers arrived. Mrs. Harlow, if we're going to do this, we need to move quickly. Nathan closed his eyes briefly, then nodded once. Sharply. Fine. But we do this by the book. Full tactical support, immediate extraction at the first sign of trouble. Of course, Rivera assured him. We'll keep your mother safe. As they began planning the operation, I slipped away to check on Matthew. He was still playing Monopoly with Officer Diaz, his face brightening when he saw me. Grandma, I'm winning. I have Boardwalk and Park Place. I smiled, ruffling his golden hair. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Is everything okay? He asked, his perceptive eyes searching my face. You look worried. Everything will be fine, I promised, praying it wasn't a lie. Sometimes grown-ups just have complicated problems to solve. Matthew nodded sagely. Like when Mom and Dad fight, but then they make up and everything's better? My heart constricted. How simple children made the world seem. How clear their understanding of emotional resolution. Yes, exactly like that. Sometimes people make mistakes, but when they love each other, they find a way to make things right. As I rejoined the adults in the kitchen, their voices hushed in tactical discussion, I carried Matthew's innocent wisdom with me. People make mistakes. Love finds a way to make things right. I could only hope that somewhere within Andrew, beneath Clara's manipulation and his own buried feelings, that love still existed. Love for his family, love for the brother whose life he was threatening to destroy. In 6 hours, I would stand on Blackwater Bridge and find out. Blackwater Bridge loomed ahead, its rusted metal frame cutting a dark silhouette against the night sky. The full moon cast an eerie glow over the abandoned railroad crossing, illuminating decades of graffiti and the skeletal remains of tracks that had once connected Belmont to the mining towns beyond the mountains. You don't have to do this, Nathan said for the 10th time, his hand gripping mine as we sat in Detective Rivera's unmarked car, parked a quarter-mile from the bridge. We could still send in a tactical team. And risk escalating the situation? I shook my head. No. Andrew may be confused, manipulated, but he's still my son. I need to talk to him, mother to son. Rivera checked her watch. It's 8:45. We should get you in position. She adjusted the small microphone clipped to my collar. Remember, we'll hear everything. At the first sign of danger, say the phrase, "We agreed on Matthew loves blueberry pancakes," I recited. "And you'll move in immediately." The detective nodded, her eyes serious. "Mrs. Harlow, your courage is admirable, but please don't take unnecessary risks. Your primary goal is to keep them talking, gather information. Let us handle the apprehension." Nathan embraced me tightly. His pilot's uniform replaced hours ago with civilian. Clothes that wouldn't draw attention. "I'll be nearby," he whispered. "I won't let anything happen to you." I cupped his face. This son who had always been my rock. "I know, sweetheart. But remember, this is about saving Andrew too." The walk to the bridge felt simultaneously endless and too short. Gravel crunched beneath my sensible shoes, each step carrying me closer to a confrontation I never could have imagined facing. The night air was crisp with early autumn, carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding forest and the faint mustiness of the creek below. As I approached the midpoint of the bridge, 2 figures emerged from the shadows at the opposite end. Andrew's tall frame was unmistakable even in the dim light, his posture rigid with tension. Beside him, slightly shorter but moving with confident steps, was the woman who had stolen my daughter-in-law's face, Clara. They stopped several yards away, creating a no-man's land of rusted metal between us. Clara tilted her head, studying me with undisguised curiosity. "Mrs. Harlow," she called, her voice identical to Marissa's, yet somehow colder, more precise. "This is unexpected. We were hoping for your daughter-in-law." "Marissa is safe," I replied steadily. "Away from whatever game you're playing." Andrew stepped forward, his face half illuminated by moonlight. "Mom, you shouldn't be here. This isn't about you." "Isn't it?" I challenged gently. "When you threaten my family, it becomes about me. When you help someone terrorize your own brother, your own nephew, it becomes very much my business." Clara laughed, the sound echoing across the metal structure. "Such devotion, such maternal protection. Tell me, Catherine, may I call you Catherine? Did you ever show Andrew this kind of fierce protection? Or was it always Nathan who got your attention, your pride, your love?" I refused to be baited. "I love both my sons equally, Clara. Something you'd understand if you'd had a mother who stayed." The verbal slap landed. Clara's amused expression faltered momentarily before hardening into something colder. "Careful, Catherine. You're alone out here." "No, she isn't," Andrew said quietly, surprising both of us. He looked at Clara with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This has gone far enough, Clara. No one was supposed to get hurt. You promised me this was about justice, about balance." Clara stepped closer to him, her hand snaking up to rest possessively on his chest. "It is, darling. Don't you see? Marissa took everything from me, the good family, the loving husband, the beautiful child. Why should she have it all when I had nothing? When we had nothing?" She turned back to me. "Did Marissa ever tell you about our childhood, Catherine? How she was adopted by doctors who gave her everything, while I bounced between foster homes? How she got private school and ballet lessons while I got neglect and worse?" "That wasn't Marissa's fault," I said, taking a cautious step forward. "She didn't create the circumstances of your separation." "No," Clara agreed, her voice softening deceptively. "But she benefited from them. And when we found each other in college, this miracle reunion of identical twins, do you know what she did? She pitied me. Poor, damaged Clara with her community college education and her waitressing job. Marissa with her pre-med track and her perfect boyfriend." "Mom," Andrew interrupted, his expression pained. "There are things you don't know. Things Marissa never told any of you." "Then tell me," I urged, taking another step closer. "Help me understand why you'd betray your own brother this way." Andrew's eyes darted to Clara, who nodded slightly. "Marissa isn't who you think she is," he said. "When she and Clara reconnected, Marissa made promises. She said they'd share everything, that they'd be real sisters. But when Clara needed help, when she was in real trouble, Marissa cut her off, completely. Said Clara was too much drama, too damaged to be part of her perfect life." Clara's eyes glistened with what looked like genuine tears. "I just wanted a sister, a family. Is that so terrible? So this is revenge?" I asked, struggling to reconcile this story with the Marissa I knew. Stealing her identity, terrorizing her child, destroying her marriage. How does that heal anything, Clara? "It's justice," Clara insisted, her voice rising. "I, for an I. She took my chance at family, so I take hers." "And where does Andrew fit into this justice?" I pressed, glancing at my son. "Is he just a tool in your revenge? Or do you actually care for him?" Something shifted in Clara's expression, a flicker of uncertainty. For the first time, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath her calculated exterior. "Andrew understands me," she said quietly. "He knows what it's like to be the one who doesn't quite fit, the one who loves the wrong person, the one who's always watching from the outside." Andrew stepped forward, breaking away from Clara's touch. "Mom, I never meant for things to go this far. It started as conversations, understanding. Clara needed someone to talk to. Then it became more. She showed me how Nathan always got everything. The flying career I wanted but couldn't have because of my vision problems. The wife He broke off, unable to finish the damning sentence. "The wife you wanted for yourself," I completed softly. He nodded miserably. I hated myself for it. I still do. But Clara made me see that it wasn't wrong to want those things, to feel cheated sometimes. "So you decided to help her destroy your brother's life? Take his child? Andrew, this isn't you. It was never supposed to go this far," he repeated desperately. Just enough to make Marissa understand how it feels to lose everything. To teach her a lesson." "A lesson?" I echoed, incredulous. "Andrew, listen to yourself. This isn't about lessons or justice. This is about obsession and revenge. I turned to Clara. And you. You don't love my son. You're using him, manipulating his feelings to get what you want. Clara's face contorted with anger. You don't know anything about what I feel. Andrew is the only person who's ever truly seen me, accepted me. Marissa had everything handed to her on a silver platter. I had to fight for every scrap. And that gives you the right to terrorize a 7-year-old boy? I challenged, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Matthew is innocent in all this. Yet you traumatized him, playing mind games, pretending to be his mother. The mention of Matthew seemed to strike something in Andrew. He flinched visibly, his gaze dropping to the rusted metal beneath our feet. Matthew? He whispered, almost to himself. I never wanted him involved. Matthew loves you, Andrew, I said, softly, seizing the opening his nephew's name had created. He idolizes his uncle. The treehouse you built him last summer is still his favorite place in the world. Andrew's face crumpled, the facade of determination giving way to raw grief. I love him too. I never wanted— Stop it! Clara snapped, gripping Andrew's arm tightly. Don't let her manipulate you. She's always favored Nathan. Always. Will. This is exactly what Marissa does. Uses emotional blackmail to get what she wants. But I could see the doubt spreading across my eldest son's face, the slow dawning of recognition as his own actions became clear to him. This isn't right, he murmured, almost to himself. Clara, we went too far. We've barely started, she hissed. After everything she did to me? After everything we've planned? You can't back out now. I took another cautious step forward, the ancient bridge creaking beneath my weight. Andrew, whatever happened between you and Marissa years ago, whatever feelings you had, they don't justify this. Deep down, you know that. Andrew looked at me, truly looked at me, for what felt like the first time that night. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. I've made such a terrible mistake. Clara's expression transformed, rage replacing the calculated manipulation. You weak, pathetic man, she snarled. I knew you'd crumble, just like everyone else in my life. No one ever stays. No one ever chooses me. In a fluid motion that happened too quickly for me to process, Clara reached into her jacket and pulled out a small handgun. The moonlight glinted dully off, its metal surface as she aimed it directly at my chest. If I can't have Marissa's life, she said, her voice eerily calm, then neither will she. Andrew moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, placing himself between me and Clara. Put it down, he demanded. This wasn't part of our agreement. No one gets hurt, you promised me. Clara's laugh was hollow, desperate. Promises? Like the ones Marissa made me? Like the ones you made when you said you loved me? When exactly did promises start mattering in this family? Clara, I said gently, fighting to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. This won't give you what you want. It won't heal what was broken in your childhood. Shut up, she shouted, the gun trembling in her hand. You don't know anything about me or what I want. I know you want to be seen, I replied. I know you want to matter. I know you want the life you believe was stolen from you. Tears streamed down Clara's face, her perfect imitation of Marissa fracturing under the weight of her own pain. She got everything, she whispered brokenly. The perfect parents, the perfect husband, the perfect child. What did I get? Foster homes where I was just another paycheck. Men who saw me as disposable. A sister who was embarrassed by me. I understand your pain, I said, my voice soft but firm. But this, terrorizing our family, manipulating Andrew, threatening me with a gun, none of this will heal that pain. It only spreads it, like a virus. For a moment, Clara's resolve seemed to waver, the gun lowering slightly. Then, from the darkness behind us, a voice rang out. Clara, please stop. Marissa stepped onto the bridge, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Nathan was right behind her, his face a mask of controlled fear. You were supposed to come alone, Clara snarled, the gun swinging toward Marissa. I'm here now, Marissa replied steadily. This is between us, Clara. It always has been. Let the others go and we can talk. Sister? To sister. Clara's bitter laugh echoed across the bridge. Now you want to talk? After 8 years of silence? After cutting me out of your life like I was nothing? I was wrong, Marissa said, taking a careful step forward. I was young and scared and selfish. I didn't know how to help you then. I didn't understand what you'd been through. Clara's hand trembled violently, tears streaming down her face. You abandoned me, just like our birth mother, just like everyone. I know, Marissa acknowledged, her voice breaking, and I've regretted it every day. But this, what you've done to my family, to my son, this isn't the answer, Clara. Andrew moved closer to Clara, his hands raised placatingly. She's right. This has to stop. No one else needs to get hurt. For one terrible moment. Clara's expression hardened, her finger tightening on the trigger. Then, like a marionette whose strings had been cut, she crumpled to her knees, the gun clattering to the metal bridge. Gut-wrenching sobs tore from her throat as she folded in on herself, years of pain and rage finally overwhelming her carefully constructed facade. Andrew knelt beside her, gently moving the gun away with his foot. As it slid across the bridge, Nathan darted forward to secure it, his pilot's training evident in his quick, precise movements. In the distance, flashlight beams cut through the darkness as Detective Rivera and her team emerged from the tree line, moving swiftly but cautiously toward the bridge. The crisis was over, but the aftermath had only just begun. I watched as Andrew gently helped Clara to her feet, his arm around her shoulders, not in romantic support, but with the careful compassion one shows to the deeply wounded. Whatever infatuation or manipulation had existed between them had been burned away in this crucible of truth, leaving only the ashes of what might have been and the painful reality of what was. Marissa approached slowly, stopping a few feet from her identical twin. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, mirror images separated not by glass, but by the vastly different lives they'd led, the choices they'd made, the wounds they carried. "I'm sorry," Marissa whispered, "for everything." Clara didn't respond, her tear-stained face a mask of exhaustion and defeat. As officers gently handcuffed her, she didn't resist, didn't speak, her fire seemingly extinguished by the culmination of her own desperate plan. Nathan reached me, pulling me into a fierce embrace. "You did it, Mom," he murmured against my hair. "You brought them both back." I clung to him, suddenly aware of how close we'd come to tragedy. "We all did," I corrected gently. "Together." As we made our way off the bridge, Andrew walked between two officers, not handcuffed, but clearly in custody. When he passed us, he paused, his eyes meeting Nathan's for the first time. "I'm sorry," he said simply, the words wholly inadequate for the magnitude of his betrayal. Nathan nodded once, his jaw tight. "We'll talk. Later." It wasn't forgiveness. That would take time, if it came at all. But it was an acknowledgement, a crack in the wall between brothers that might someday allow reconciliation to seep through. In the chaos of police lights and official statements, I found myself thinking of Matthew, safe at the safe house with Officer Diaz, blissfully unaware of how close his family had come to shattering beyond repair. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, painful revelations, the beginning of a long healing process. But tonight, as we drove away from Blackwater Bridge, I allowed myself to believe that healing was possible, that from the ashes of betrayal and obsession, something new might yet emerge. Something damaged, perhaps, scarred and imperfect, but alive, like our family. 6 months passed like a season of quiet healing. Winter descended on Belmont, snow blanketing our wounds in pristine white, then melted into a cautious spring that mirrored our family's tentative rebirth. The legal consequences unfolded with merciful discretion. Clara faced charges of identity theft, stalking, and endangering a child, but her documented history of mental health issues and the testimony of both Marissa and Andrew led to a resolution focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. She was committed to a specialized facility where she could receive the treatment she'd needed since childhood. Andrew avoided jail time through a plea agreement that required extensive community service and therapy. The professional consequences were steeper. His architecture firm placed him on indefinite leave after the story broke, unwilling to associate with someone who had participated in such a disturbing scheme, regardless of his eventual change of heart. Today, the early April. Sunshine streamed through the windows of my kitchen as I prepared lunch, the normalcy of the task a comfort after months of upheaval. Matthew sat at the counter, carefully constructing a paper airplane, his tongue poking out in concentration. "Do you think Uncle Andrew will like this one, Grandma?" he asked, holding up his creation. "I made it look like the plane's dad flies." "I think he'll love it," I assured him, marveling at children's capacity for forgiveness. Matthew had been told a simplified version of what happened, that Uncle Andrew had made some bad choices because he was confused and sad, but that he was working hard to make things right. The doorbell rang, and Matthew jumped down from his stool. "He's here!" he exclaimed, racing to the front door. I followed more slowly, giving the brothers a moment alone. Nathan had insisted on being present for these supervised visits. His trust in Andrew still fragile but healing. The relationship between my sons was like a broken bone, painfully reset, carefully tended, slowly mending into something that might eventually be stronger at the fractured places. In the living room, Andrew knelt to admire Matthew's airplane, his face lighting up with genuine joy at his nephew's enthusiasm. Nathan stood nearby, his posture relaxed but vigilant. When Andrew glanced up at his brother, the gratitude in his eyes was palpable. Gratitude for this second chance neither of them had been certain would come. "Mom," Andrew said warmly as I entered, rising to embrace me. He looked better than he had in months, the haunted shadow gone from his eyes, his shoulders no longer curved with the weight of guilt. "How was your session this morning?" I asked quietly as Matthew showed Nathan his airplane's special features. "Good," Andrew replied. "Hard, but good. Dr. Levine says I'm making progress with the abandonment issues." He smiled ruefully. "Turns out watching Dad walk out on us when I was 10 left more scars than I realized." I squeezed his hand. "Healing isn't linear, sweetheart. Some days will be harder than others." "I know, but I'm grateful for the chance to try." The back door opened and Marissa entered, carrying a pot of fresh flowers for the table. She hesitated momentarily upon seeing Andrew, then offered a small, genuine smile. "You're early. How was traffic from the city?" "Not bad," Andrew replied, his manner respectful, careful. "Those daffodils are beautiful." The interaction between them was cordial but distant, the comfortable closeness they'd once shared replaced by a careful politeness that acknowledged both the past and the necessary boundaries of the present. Marissa had forgiven Andrew's betrayal, understanding better than anyone the manipulative power Clara could wield. But forgiveness didn't erase consequences, and both of them knew that certain bridges, once burned, could never be fully rebuilt. As we gathered around the table for lunch, I found myself studying the faces of those I loved most in the world, marveling at our collective resilience. Nathan, my steady son, who had faced the unimaginable betrayal of his brother and wife's past feelings, yet chosen the difficult path of reconciliation over easy rejection. Marissa, whose compassion for the sister who tried to steal her life revealed a depth of empathy I hadn't fully appreciated before. Matthew, innocently wise, accepting the complicated emotions of adults with the simple grace of childhood. And Andrew, humbled and healing, working every day to rebuild what his actions had nearly destroyed. "I visited Clara yesterday," Marissa said quietly as we passed dishes around the table. It was the first time she'd mentioned these visits in front of Andrew, though Nathan and I had known about them for months. Andrew looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "How is she?" "Better, I think. She's engaging with her therapy now, not just going through the motions." "She asked about you?" Andrew nodded, a complex emotion crossing his face. "Tell her I hope she's finding peace." "I will," Marissa promised, her hand reaching unconsciously for Nathan's. He took it, his thumb brushing reassuringly across her knuckles. Matthew, oblivious to the undercurrents, launched into a detailed account of his science project on butterflies, his enthusiasm drawing smiles from all of us. As he described metamorphosis, the miraculous transformation from caterpillar to chrysalis to winged beauty, I couldn't help but see the metaphor for our own family's journey. Later, as Andrew prepared to leave, he paused in the entryway, looking back at the home he'd nearly destroyed. "Do you think we'll ever get back to normal?" he asked softly. I shook my head, touching his cheek gently. "No, sweetheart, not the old normal. But something new, something that acknowledges what we've been through. Something stronger, I hope." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll see you next Sunday?" "We'll be here," I promised. As his car disappeared down the street, I turned to find Nathan watching me from the living room doorway. "You were right," he said quietly. "About Andrew. About giving him a second chance. We all deserve grace," I replied, "even when we can't see it in ourselves." That evening, after Nathan and Marissa had taken Matthew home, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of healing. The past 6 months had taught me that family isn't just about blood or shared history. It's about choosing each other, day after day, even when that choice is difficult. It's about seeing the truth of who we are, flawed, wounded, sometimes selfish creatures, and loving anyway. Clara had wanted to steal Marissa's identity, believing that external trappings, a husband, a child, A comfortable home would fill the void inside her. What she hadn't understood was that identity isn't something that can be stolen or worn like a costume. It's built through choices, relationships, the slow accretion of love given and received. As darkness fell, I thought about the duality that had nearly destroyed us, the twin faces of love and obsession, betrayal and redemption, truth and deception. We had walked through fire and emerged changed but intact, our bonds tested and ultimately strengthened by the crucible of crisis. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for both forgiveness and boundaries. The road ahead wasn't perfectly smooth. Andrew's recovery would have setbacks. Nathan's trust would take time to fully rebuild, and Marissa's relationship with Clara would remain complex and bittersweet. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I was grateful for the imperfect miracle of family, not the idealized version we sometimes pretend to have, but the real, messy, resilient connections that bend without breaking, that weather storms and emerge, somehow still standing. In the end, it wasn't about the person we appear to be on the surface, but the truth of who we are underneath. And in that truth, however painful its revelation, lies the possibility of genuine healing.